Bill, would you like to read the?
Sure. On June 16th, 2021, Governor Baker signed into law an act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. This act includes an extension until April 1, 2022 of the remote meeting provisions of his March 12th, 2020 executive order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. This is an entirely Zoom meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll do a opening roll call. Jack,
Present.
Robert,
Aye.
George,
Present.
Nate is not here at the moment. And Brian is on leave. I am present. Okay, great. I'm just gonna go into our agenda. Okay, so we've got review the report. Bill has drafted a handy, comprehensive report. For those of you who've been on the committee a little bit longer, I don't recall the committee doing this degree of a report to the Board of Selectmen and town meeting previously. I feel like, we did a bit of a PowerPoint presentation maybe last year, but this seems really comprehensive. Before we kind of get into it, does anyone have any kind of high level comments on the history of doing anything like this and the precedent around it? I personally am a fan, but.
I'll merely say that my recollection is that in the previous years that I was on the committee, Jack and Robert could probably speak a lot with a lot more detail about other years, but it was sort of a bibliographic, I don't know, a biographic statement about the members. So, but this sort of presents a reflection of what we've done, why we've decided to do it, what our goal, what our principles were in going through the process. I think this is great.
Jack or Robert, did you want to add anything about sort of what we've done previously? Add any historical memory to this?
I think it was well done, and I think we should support it wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I agree. I think the thing is, it's always at the discretion of the FinCom chair and the administrators that you're working with, and it's changed. We've had, 4 or 5 different town administrators in the last 8-10 years. So it changes quite a bit at their discretion also. So this doesn't surprise me, but it's very good.
Excellent. So, so far, Bill, you have a ringing endorsement. It sounds like, did you want to add any kind of anything else to it before we really kind of take a vote or take any suggestions as far as amendments?
Well, what I want to do is just go through the major sections and just tell everybody what we're trying to accomplish in those, and then the group can vote. So just to clarify what each
and I'm sorry,
section-
Bill, is it possible right now your share screen looks really kind of compressed and narrow? Is it possible to make it like
yeah,
full
I gotta
screen?
move it to another screen.
Oh,
That's my,
everybody should have a copy of it, but
can you, let me stop share and then share again. It's on, I have a portrait screen.
Bill, share and share alike.
There you go.
we can always
So-
count on Bob for the commentary here. It's a nice, always
So-
adds a little something to the meetings.
There it is. So really the goal here is to document your process, I think, as George has said, and then some of your observations. And by virtue of doing this, you're setting yourself up or us, for that matter, the administration, to make some changes to improve the process. So I think that we have a similar report for capital budget, and there are similar items in capital budget regarding capital. So next year, you'll move less, you'll have less sort of improve this process and more about the actual finances and document. But the first page is basically your report to town meeting. The chair had crafted this and there's a lot of good ties into the report itself. So it is essentially, as we discussed earlier, an executive summary of the report with other comments. And a lot of this is about, it's difficult when you have sort of revenue constraints and economic development is crucial. Moving forward is your process. One thing I was discussing with the chair is I'm going to put your preliminary votes in this column underneath the fact that you voted in favor of the budgets. But here's your departments, what you asked of them, the questions you asked of them, and then your observations that or a budget growth, it is not really a cost issue. It is really a revenue problem. Employee hiring and retention, alternate fund, it's difficult to do that given the constraints, alternate funding sources. Police and fire have done a good job of finding alternate funding sources from both capital and operations. And you're recommending the same thing of other departments. And regionalization and challenges in revenue, budget planning, it's made it difficult during the pandemic. One of the things here you're recommending is maybe doing a 3-year outlook as an exercise and seeing what you might be coming up against in the future years. So moving forward, you have recommendations, and the recommendations are related to a lot of the things that people had said. And so what we've done is take and backed up those recommendations by showing that our difficulty is we don't have enough commercial. And here's your residential 2022, here's your residential 2002. So the revenue levy, revenue other sources in terms of where can we find other sources. This budget process in schools, one of the things that I think the group talked about is in the past, possibly not so much this year, you would come up against a scheduling constraint because the schools would drop the budget on everybody's desk and everybody's scrambling to try to figure out how to adjust. So what this does is recommend the town administrators sort of have that power to provide a list of add or deduct. And now I'm recognizing maybe you don't want to have deduct proposals. You can deal with those, later, but add items so that the things that we talked about, the fire departments, in terms of the overtime and the positions, they might be in a list so that as the school budget comes out, you've already seen those add and deducts and the town administrator would have presented them. And that way the budget starts all the way back there rather than getting tweaked as you get the school budget. So that's an idea. Budget preparation, we're recommending that it starts from the system that manages the budget to see how we can get templates and other information directly from the system. So we're not creating spreadsheets or other documents and creating a redundant process. And then, so benchmarking in terms of labor and employment factors, what are other towns pay? What is that relationship? And this is more an internal exercise. We don't really want to, be posting these kind of things in terms of competition, but something that your group could rely upon to say, how do we look in terms of other communities as it relates to, wages and things like that. Standard data trends, the Division of Local Services, that's where we got this data up here, has some outstanding data. So I think what we want to do is, what is the data you want to see as a group? And we'll keep track of that and then possibly post that on the finance page so that where, when you show up for the budget process, you've got some history that is. And then multi-year budget exercises I mentioned up above, possibly looking at that so that, you can see if you wanted to add staff or other things, how does that look from a 1-year perspective? Or do I add positions in future years? So as people are making their priorities and everybody's making the tough decisions, 3 years sometimes, and not as a formal exercise where you've got an ordinance, something that you can ask the departments to say, well, does this work for you next year? Or, things like that. Capital is pretty much the same as what the Capital Improvements Committee recommended. Better definitions of capital, better understanding of where we want to fund certain types of capital, rolling stock versus fixed assets, things like that. Exhaust all efforts to find somebody else's money. And the project should be fully vetted. They should have better level designs and everything else before they get to the CIP. And then where we haven't seen progress on some projects, take a look at it to determine whether or not it's still going to move forward. And then protocols for rolling stock. This is something that both capital budget and I know finance has said is a standard set of rolling stock, decision points and performance standards across all the equipment. Obviously, fire and police are different than building, than DPW, but in each one of those categories, they have certain standards. So the conclusions here, and it's interesting through this process, is that each group, needs to be part of a sequential capital review process. So you're not basically, in the first step with the Capital Review Committee, talking in great detail about a truck and then repeating that in FinCom and then repeating that. And so what is the best process so that it builds on each step rather than repeats it? So there's, different towns approach it differently, but, we don't want to be in the step of you've got a good rating from your capital budget committee and then all the way to the board level, people are saying, why don't you buy a 350 instead of a 250? So we want to build on each decision of capital. So this basically recommends, creating some sort of guideline that gives each group in the process a specific role. And then I will be attaching the proposed budget that is in the warrant. But that's pretty much a report. I have to add the votes that you did up in this section. And then in the future, what we're hopefully doing is we're adopting some of these things over the interim between this budget cycle and the next. We might meet to take a look at how we have been able to accomplish some of these steps or develop economic development, marketing and other steps. Develop a program where we're actually aggressively going after other revenue sources and we're making it part of the budget process. So it'll be, over that time, hopefully we're looking at implementing some of these recommendations. And then the next report is more about what the finances look like with these new approaches. And that's it for the report. I have the warrant we can go over when the committee is ready.
Okay, let's open it up for any comment from the committee. Is Nate on? Has he been elevated?
Let me see.
I know he was trying to join.
I'm sorry, there he is. I just promoted him. There we go.
Terrific.
He should be in. I can take this down so I'll stop the share. So there you go.
Great. Nate, thanks for joining us. We were just going over the report. Did you have anything that you wanted to add? Nate?
You're muted, Nate.
Nate, we can't hear anything from you, but I know that you had indicated you wanted to make some kind of comment.
I'm sorry.
There we go.
We have a family emergency, so I'm a little befuddled right at the moment. But anyway, I had emailed you earlier today about the possibility of having an apprenticeship program where we could use VOTEC students or somebody like that to fill some of these positions that don't need a lot of certifications or stuff like that, like mechanics for the trucks or stuff. But there's the town waste thing, the golf, there's beaches, there's loads of places we could probably use entry-level people and get them a job. And we're paying right now for the school. We might as well get something out of it. That's just my thought.
Reaction from the committee or from staff? Town administration? I mean, this is a kind of high level concept like the town could explore.
Yeah,
having some
okay.
sort of
I'm
apprentice-
sorry, you know.
No. I'm just, what I'm suggesting is that the way that I tried to frame the intro letter was to not necessarily commit to us to anything. Like, for example, I've obviously been pushing hard the regionalization conversation, but the report and the letter kind of says, you know, we should explore this, not necessarily like we should do this. We should, it's basically like giving us an out if it turns out that, you know, there's some legal obstacle, for example. So that would be just my thought if we were to add something around that maybe we kind of
Okay.
couch it in the framework of,
Well,
we should
maybe-
explore the possibility of doing an apprenticeship program, given the connection with the tech school.
Yeah, maybe we can look at it later, but I think we're missing.
I don't have a problem. I
opportunity.
personally don't have a problem adding it, Nate. I'm just suggesting that we just frame it as a suggestion as opposed to we should do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
well,
I just screen shared the report, and one of the sections in the report said labor is evident, labor is concern. And then we also recommend, we believe internships and other approaches could develop better relationships with staff early in their career. So we could basically look at this as, you know, explore areas such as VOTEC and other areas where
yeah,
we're getting people interested. So we could put that under the labor section in here.
okay.
Does that work for you, Nate?
Yeah, that works for me. I just think, I know those kids are talented. You know, I've worked with them long enough. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think,
Give
yeah,
them
so
everybody needs the first job.
and exploring the, you know, the concept of an apprenticeship, if it works within
Yeah,
labor contracts and everything else, you know,
yeah,
doesn't hurt us to explore it.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other thoughts about, is there anything else that anyone would want to add or change, or are we good to approve it?
I thought it looked good.
I'll make a motion to accept it.
Second,
So would it be a motion to accept it with the amended changes that were, you know, outlined by Mr. Scott and Mr. Ladley, something like that as a motion?
So we have, if we want to link this to the budget, that inherently the report is a review of the budget. We might want to say that to accept the budget with changes such as the fire department overtime and the position in conservation as previously voted, and also accept the report. Because then you're just wrapping it all into one vote. If that sounds
Does
like.
anyone want to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor, George,
Aye.
Jack,
aye,
Nate,
Aye.
Robert,
Aye.
I'm an I as well. Okay, thank you.
So the next thing is we have the warrant. We can go over that quickly if you want to,
Terrific.
just to get you the understanding of what's moving forward. Bob had put this together. Do you have it?
Yeah, and I'd say to whatever degree you can kind of highlight what's different.
Right.
I think would be helpful.
So
And can you,
not a lot-
again, kind of like maybe pull that out a little bit? Maximize it. Thank you. That's great.
Yeah, it's about a half page. So.
No, that's fine.
Budget adjustments are typical in the beginning. Then there's the municipal budget itself. There are two changes in that, as I indicated before. There is the fire department overtime and the conservation position. Those will be added to this later. It's a well sort of constructed warrant in the sense that you start with this budget, then you go into all the enterprise budgets right after it, and then you go into capital, and then you go into the other one. So here's a golf enterprise budget, and then you move forward, water budget, septic enterprise budget. So the district school budget, the Cape Cod Regional Tech budget. So you can see the pattern of trying to keep everything in sort of sections. And then the golf, it starts off the capital, golf capital expense, water division capital expense. We asked them to break out the trucks. Originally, they were listed as various vehicles. Now each truck is broken out. The water main is a bond on 6A, so it requires a separate article. Fire department, to their credit, they have a lot of.
Sorry,
grants.
can you back up on that one? Is that new?
Water main?
Yeah, I'm trying to identify what's different from the last time we went over it.
No,
I don't remember seeing this
water
before,
main
but-
was in the CIP, so it's not new, it just isn't in the major list anymore. It's a separate article because it's borrowing. It
Okay.
used to be in a list in the water department, so anything that requires borrowing or special action is gonna be its own article.
All right, do members have any questions about that? Just because we're gonna have to take a vote on it. Okay, moving on.
All right, so fire, as I said, to their credit, they have this amount in grants that's supporting all their acquisitions up there. So they are one of the better organizations in terms of finding somebody else's money. Now, this is where we took all of the capital, and this is in the sequence of the capital improvements plan, and it is the same numbers. We only have to change this. I think this is a running total. It will be 50,000. We just had the capital plan meeting just before yours. So as I said, this is all pretty much sequential with the what the capital improvements committee, and then there are school projects in here. And the capital improvements committee recommended there is a project for Emmy Small School of 550,000. In plumbing, they recommended 50,000 for design. They're commenting that we need to see what's going to happen with the school before we start making those kind of investments, but we didn't want to slow them down. At the end of this, we've got items such as a roadway improvement, which was a prior override, and that's going back in. So the total appropriate request.
Yeah, Bill, can I add a note on that
Sure.
topic just for the discussion of the finance committee? Because I hope to have the finance committee aware and supportive of this. As you recall, when we started the budget process, one of the first elements was the Board of Selectmen's establishment of their budgetary goals, and we've discussed these. But just to refresh everyone and give you an update, we started off the budget process with the general goal of taking a close look at the capital improvements and the roadway improvements, both as items that, as a result of the overall pandemic financing, were removed from the levy budget and financed through free cash. And the goal was to make every attempt to return those to the levy budget. And when I had made my first presentation of the budget immediately after January 1, we had to reserve a certain amount for the estimated increases in the educational budgets. And at that time, we were able to fund $750,000 of the original roadway improvement override in the levy budget. And I've been working as I indicated, I think not at your last meeting, but the last meeting I attended with the Finance Committee, with the new educational budgets, we sat down with finance and we tried to restructure things to readdress those goals and see if we can make further progress. And obviously, with the educational budgets coming in less than our original estimates, it gave us some resources to work with that. So as a result, and Bill, if you could go to the beginning of the article, I just want to make sure, we refresh on where it says Article 2, the town will vote to raise and appropriate a sum and transfer from free cash a sum. And the raise and appropriate amount would represent the amount of the roadway improvements that we would be able to return to the levy budget. And as of today, my recommendation is that and I go back, I pulled all of the records from the town meetings. I think it was 2013 or so when that original override was voted at the ballot and at town meeting. It was a $1.1 million override. And that's the amount that has been removed from the levy and placed in the free cash. And we've been able to restore the entire 1.1 million in the original roadway. Now we've increased the roadway investment each year. Up to now, it's like 1.3 and change, but the original override amount was 1.1, and that's the amount we've been able to come up with. So what this budget will do is it will restore 100% of the original roadway improvements override to the levy budget where it belongs, and that we hope next year we'll be able to take a chunk out of the capital as well. But I felt very good about that progress and being able to recapture the entire original override. And so that's what the recommendation here is. And so on Article 12 there, the raise and appropriate amount would be 1.1 million. So I am astounded that we've been able to make that much progress. So, but I wanted to make sure everyone was on board with that.
So George, I see that your hand is raised, but I wasn't sure if you were raising it on
Yeah,
this topic or a different one, because if it's a different one, I would say, can we come back to it and just stick to this topic for a moment?
Sure.
Great. So as it goes to this, I mean, I guess the question I have is, we had a good school budget this year. How confident are we that that's going to happen next year and that we're going to be able to maintain this progress?
Okay, I don't think that we'll receive a budget probably this good, and to be able to repeat the progress of 1.1 million, I would have thought that would have been absolutely impossible for this year, but we were able to do it. So I think we retain it as a goal, and then next year, I go back to our discussion with David Flynn on the prognosis for the state financing. And, he seemed to feel, and again, the legislature has not completely approved the governor's budget to begin with. So we don't know that these numbers are 100% hard. However, the assessment, although they can make a supplemental assessment, I think they voted based on their estimated numbers. And David felt that that would represent the floor of state aid, moving forward. And there were additional steps to implement the Educational Opportunity Act, but there was quite an enormous increase in the state aid for the regional school district, estimated at that 2.5 million, 2.4 million. That was the reason that the school budget didn't go up as much. And so we know for a fact we're not going to see that growth in state aid next year. But I would say that looking at all of the factors that we do know, that if that is the floor, we see that would be the second year in a row that they've received 2.5 million more than they had in FY 22. So even small growth, along with that, if that 2.5 remains in their base, what our hope is that that would somewhat temper the growth in the school budget. So that, there wouldn't be another 5, 6, 7% on top of that would create problems for us. But, we don't know that now. So I guess the short answer to your question is I have no confidence that we'll be able to maintain progress at the clip that we bit off this year. This was an extraordinary year, and I think we're extremely fortunate. But I would retain it as a goal for next year, and next year we'll have a different set of circumstances. And if we maintain that as a goal, the only thing, I can guarantee you we'll make as much progress as we can, because I will approach the municipal budget just as I did this year, from as conservative a standpoint as possible, but not unrealistic, not unfunding items that we know we're going to spend. Like I think was done a little bit in the past, but I feel good about this budget, and I don't feel going in from this budget to next year that there's big holes. There's things that we left out. There's things that we're going to have to, fund properly. So if that truly is the case, and we're conservative, maybe we can keep the overall budget growth down next year, and reserve some funds to, if our goal is to take 1.5 more million, put it in. We might not make it all, but if we make a big chunk, I'll be happy. So that's just a little discussion on it.
I think it would be helpful, especially just as we go into town meeting, to have, I know that you said you pulled a bunch of town meeting votes, any kind of background information that you might have on this that would be helpful to the committee in terms of being able to even just explain it to voters. I would certainly appreciate that. Committee members, do you have any questions or thoughts or concerns on this?
I think it's clear cut myself.
Okay. Nothing else on that. George, you had your hand raised on another item as far as capital goes.
Yeah, I think it's the previous one, but the one on the 3 point something or other million for water main on 6A. Is that going to be a revenue bond or a GO?
That bond will be a general obligation bond. However, and that's really, the bank requirements, to get the most optimum interest rates, you have to have a general obligation bond. It is programmed to be 100% repaid from the special revenue fund in water, which I might add is also it's not an enterprise fund. It's from the special revenue. So the water revenues will pay 100% of the debt service, but the way the bond is structured itself, it's not considered a revenue bond.
But do we, and I don't want to take too much on this, I'm curious.
Yes, sir.
But can we, since it is an account we have, can we pledge that on the bond, or is this just going to be a credit decision on the part of the lender?
Yeah, it's a credit decision that we get, obviously, the most advantageous rates that are available in the nation. And we are a highly sought after security because, of our AA+ bond rating, which, we are just a shade off of a AAA. And by virtue of that, when we put out the bids, the rates that we're allowed to borrow under are the lowest possible rates. It is technically possible to not pledge the full faith and credit of the community and to attempt to base the security solely on the revenues from the water department. But what we find is that limits the marketability of the security to such a degree that it has a significant impact on the the interest rates and the payback, and the overall financing. So in our system, our borrowing is so low community wide that the only real feasible option that's the best value for the residents is to go general obligation, but make sure that the rates cover the, security. And the only difference is that from a technical legal standpoint, in the event that we did not have revenues sufficient underwater to pay back that security, the town would still owe the money. And I think you can follow that. That's exactly the way the financial community wants to see it, is that they know that the payback is guaranteed. It's not based on any speculative revenues, and that's how we structure the debt to keep the interest rates low.
No, I'm fully on board. I underwrote municipal securities, so
Mhm.
I'm
know.
just curious which route we were going, but
Yes, sir. I get it, but it's good. It's fun to talk about this stuff too. I love the securities and the whole bid process, and I would say, even though interest rates are rising, the municipal borrowing rates are still historically low. So it's still a good time to go to market.
I thought I had funny definitions of fun.
Yeah. No, I'm a debt geek. I admit it.
Well, then I guess you're in the right job, right?
Yeah.
All right. George, does that answer your question? Do you have any other
Yep.
questions on that? Okay. So we were finishing up Article 12. Were there any other matters as it related to that item that you wanted to draw our attention to, Bill or Bob?
No, I just might, on this one, provide more detail in your report, so it's sort of documented that this is coming out of levy, or a portion of it is, and I'll work with Bob on that, so that sort of documentation progresses from the Finance Committee report to the warrant.
That works for me. Okay.
And the next one is police cruiser financing. This is the financing schedule that we had discussed before, that moves it from one cost of $406,000 to this schedule that's here for 6 cruisers.
Okay.
I
Next
just
one-
want to add something on that too, is I think the police department did a great job agreeing to the 4-year schedule, because I worked with a lot of PDs, and I know their standard operating procedures. They like to go 3 years on the cruisers and then try to turn them out. And our guys recognized they're gonna have to keep the cars for an extra year, longer than they would like, in order to make it so that it's feasible to continue to make sure that they're keeping up with their needs. And so I just wanted to point that out, that going that 4-year program was something that the police stepped up to make our finances work, and I appreciate that.
Next one is a sanitation truck, and this is paid for.
Oh, Bill, you sound like a frog again.
Oh. I don't understand.
Team software, I'll do it to you. But Bob, in the meantime, I will say, I appreciate how often, just from a leadership standpoint, I appreciate how often you kind of call out when your departments, make an effort to do something, or when they're making a sacrifice on something. I mean, it's a good quality in an organization head. And I think hopefully that builds a lot of trust and helps, with town morale and whatnot. So I
Well,
appreciate
thanks.
that.
We're working to build a team. You've got a great organization here, and there's a lot of good people, and they're working hard. And that's why I think that the big challenge is just everyone's hard work. We all get it coordinated, going in the same direction. I don't think there's anything we can't accomplish.
Well, hopefully we can accomplish a lot. All right, Bill, have we figured out
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Sound better? Great. Sanitation truck is coming out of a recycling fund. And transfer station capital, this is something that the vendor is making an improvement by adding another weigh scale and a remote communication device, so people don't have to cross traffic to talk to or go upstairs to talk to the crew that's there. This
Bill,
again,
can I operate that one from my phone? So I
Yeah, I
feel like
think
I do
so,
my
yeah.
heat.
You can affect the weight scale, I guess. No,
All right, I'll download the app. We'll see.
there you go. So recreation revolving fund, this is a very important step to sort of help the recreation department to run effective programming and provide them the financial tools to do that. So at the end of the fiscal year, anything over $10,000 goes back to the general fund. But to give you an example, if we were to set up a program after the budget was done, you know, you can collect the fees, put them in the revolving account, and then pay staff that if you use the prior system, you'd have to budget to assume, you know, the number of programs and participation in programs. So this allows you to do a lot more flexibility like recreation should have. Collective bargaining wage adjustments. Is it?
Bill, I don't want to interrupt you, but I
Go
just
ahead.
wanted to underscore the one technical point for the benefit of the Finance Committee. And I know we've discussed it before, but I think it's important now moving into, you know, we all understand the ins and outs of these things, that the Recreation Revolving Fund under 4453D, which is the revolving fund specifically set up for recreation and for parks, does contain checks and balances in it, because I've had the question, you know, that people are concerned, well, you know, could they just jack up the fees and create some kind of a war chest? And the answer to that question is no, they cannot. That it's designed to just pay for the cost of the programming that they do, and any balance that's left over in that fund at the end of the fiscal year in excess of $10,000 reverts back to the general fund. And so it's the state's recommended financing mechanism for self-supporting recreation funds, and it does have that check and balance. So I think it's a fairly safe tool to use to fund recreation, and the Department of Revenue has recommended that the town adopt this. And so that's, you know, one of their recommendations that they've made.
Yeah, and I'll just point out for the committee that you may have noticed in the report, there is, you know, reference to it might make sense to evaluate what if the fees that we charge for various programs match the cost. And so that, I mean, that is something that I think there hasn't always been a matching around that. So it seems like this would pair well with that approach moving forward.
So moving ahead, 17 collective bargaining wage adjustments. Article 18, this is an important article, wastewater infrastructure stabilization fund. It basically sets a stabilization fund for short-term rental excise tax to be able to fund the wastewater program. So this is, if you look at the wastewater program budget, there are columns that represent certain revenue streams. This one addresses this revenue stream and sets aside the funding for wastewater.
75% of the short-term rental tax is going to go in a stabilization fund just for wastewater.
Well, are you sure that it's the 75% of the short-term rental tax and not 75% of the overall rooms tax? Because my understanding is that the Department of Revenue can't differentiate between short-term rental and rooms tax. They just
No,
collect
they
it all.
can. We have reports, and I think the Finance Committee receives them, but I'm like sure that you do. And they differentiate, and we receive a separate number for the short-term rental and for the hotel tax. So it's just going to be for the short-term rental portion of it.
Okay, if I guess I was thinking in terms of alignment with the Municipal Modernization Act, but that was just historically what I'd been told. But that was like right around the time that the short-term rental tax bill passed, so they may have adjusted since then.
Yeah, and when they started off the first year, they would not differentiate it. But now they're reporting it out separately. And we'll have to, keep double checking with this. I know town council did a pretty thorough review and he had recommended that this was fine as well. So
So why 75% of the short-term rental tax money? Why not 100?
In all sincerity, it's not a number. First of all, it's cast in stone. We can vote a percentage. It has to be more than 25%. And looking at the numbers, I pegged it at the 75% for two reasons. Number one, we wanted to, as this grows a little, to be in the neighborhood of maybe the 1.2 million a year, funding that on an annual basis, that stabilization fund, to just keep it structural. But the idea is also that the town's general fund and under Prop 2.5, obviously we have been right smack against Prop 2.5. It has provided us with tremendous difficulty meeting both our educational obligations in the regional system and at the same time meeting the primary service needs. I mean, even as recently as last year, we required a Prop 2.5 override just to meet the assessment for the Dennis Yarmouth Regional School District, and their budget only went up 2.6, 2.7%. So we're so volatile with number one, the educational formula, and we're so backed up to the Prop 2.5. The idea would be we would reserve a small portion of the short-term rental to help as kind of a pressure relief on the general fund to enable us to continue to meet local service needs. Certainly, you could eliminate that cushion, although it would necessitate more frequent Proposition 2.5 overrides on the other side. So what I was trying to do is build a little more, just a little more sustainability into the general fund budget so that we wouldn't have overrides as frequently. But that was the thought process behind establishing the 75. But that is a number, and I'll say it, openly. If the finance committee and the selectmen, talk about it, and you folks collectively feel that you want to lower that cushion, yes, it'll put more pressure on the general fund, and it'll cause stress that way. But it will also increase the amount that's going into the stabilization fund for wastewater. So again, it's like everything. I'm trying to achieve a balance, but I am open, and I want to discuss these items so that when we do, make this choice, we make the choice that is the wisest one. And that's what I felt at the time, that a small amount of cushion to assist the general fund was a positive step.
Yeah, I hear that. What does 25% right now account for in dollars?
Well,
Ballpark?
if you take a look at it, we had about 1.3 million. So, 25% of that is maybe
300.
300 figure and change a little bit. So the idea you'd be about 1.1 million versus 300,000. And if that grows a little, I'd be up to my 1.2 million, and you'd still have, a little cushion at 300,000. I mean, you could put 75, you could put 80. I wouldn't put 100. But like I say, I think it's a decision that we need to make together. And it's, one of the things I sincerely look to the finance committee for a comfort level with where we peg that. And I was happy with, if we can get 1.2 million a year, every year, that would be a solid amount for that stabilization fund. That would be very, very helpful.
Yeah, I guess my question would be though, I'm sorry, what'd you say it was 1.2 a year?
Yeah.
That would go, yeah. So you get 1.2 a year that goes into the WIF. But that would fund only what, phase one, right? We've got like 5 more phases to go.
Well, here's the thing. Right now, we're trying to come up with a debt service strategy, right? That will fund phase one, which includes the entire treatment plant with absolutely no contribution, from the general fund, except things, such as this nature. So I think it's extraordinarily important to make sure, first and foremost, that your debt service strategy is sound on that phase one. And there is additional work on phase two for and we don't have the individual costs to homeowners of the collection system relative to, each property. But the point is, it would be substantially less. I've lost your video here, but it would be substantially less with the plant paid for. So you could say that these funds are not just for phase one, they're to build the wastewater treatment plant so that you don't have to assess the residential people the cost of the plant in phase two. You're going to assess them the cost of the distribution system, which in and of itself is going to be enormous. But I think by knocking off that plant in phase one and not saddling the residential people with that cost, by using the power of the commercial tax base, as well as tools such as this, I think it's going to be really, really smart to do. But no question, we have more work to do on figuring out exactly how to finance the subsequent phases. But I'll tell you this, we have got a tiger by the tail just getting that plant financed. And so that's kind of the number one thing is that once you get the plant rolling and operating, it's going to be a lot less money to expand the distribution system. And otherwise you need an enormous override to, that's what most places do. I've never seen, a town go less than 50% on the taxes, for a treatment plant, but that's what we're doing. That's the game plan. So let's do it.
Yeah, your point is well taken. I think that it certainly is a benefit. But when I just think about how long we've kicked the can down the road on doing wastewater and how much the costs have escalated as a result, and the reticence that historically has occurred at town meeting around doing it. Yeah, we got phase one, but we didn't really have to tax ourselves to do it. So, the next big test of, is town meeting willing to do it, is, what are they going to have to tax themselves? And, to a certain extent, if you can say, hey, we've taken visitors' dollars and, that come into the town, this is new revenue, and we put it all towards wastewater, so you don't have to pay for it. That sells well, right? I don't know, what do other committee members think about this?
I think it's a good number. I can't see lowering it.
Anyone else? I gotta think on this one. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with 75% going just to wastewater. I
Think it through.
maybe 85 or 90. I don't
Think
know.
it
I gotta
through.
think
You're
about it.
not hurting my feelings if that 75 changes. I put that out there, so we discuss it. And I think I've outlined the issues, the concerns, and no, it requires, some thought, but like I say, both of us, we're talking about the same thing too, is how do we keep this machine moving without undue pressure on the residential taxpayers? And it's a split, because they got pressure. There's pressure on the on the operating budget that we've historically struggled meeting, except obviously for this year. And then there's stress on the capital side, which we need. It's almost an unlimited source of funds to tackle this infrastructure.
Yeah, and I completely understand where you're coming from of wanting to have a little bit of a cushion. And, you know, in a perfect world, I would completely be there with you. I think my concern is that historically voters have seen wastewater as kind of an option. If they, you know, like, and it's not optional economically, environmentally, legally, it's not optional. We have to do it, right? So if you're picking which thing you potentially would have to tax yourself on, you know, it's easier to say no to wastewater, right? And it's a lot harder to say no to making sure that, you know, we've got, you know, adequate staffing at our municipal services, in my mind. So that's, I just don't want to give people an out, make it easier for people to say no to doing wastewater. That's in the
Oh,
long
and Stephanie, let me just tell you, I really appreciate this discussion and I agree wholeheartedly with you. But the one thing I want to leave you with, and it's not like debating or anything, but I just have to give you the benefit of my philosophy on municipal finance, because we have a complicated budget here and a whole system. This is not a small town. And there is a general philosophy that will provide us success. I will guarantee you in the long run for municipal finance is along the lines of, to kind of simplify it, you know, never put all of your eggs in one basket. The only way that I'm able to put these budgets together and have it work so that the departments have what they need to operate and we're not having an override every year is I look for as much diversification in the overall revenue mix as possible. And it gets back to the discussion that we had with those charts and stuff. I got to tell you, I'm a little concerned in Yarmouth that we're somewhat over reliant on the property tax as the sole harbinger of the entire municipal budget. That yes, we do have the local estimated receipts, but we have no state aid to speak of. And it's created a situation that I personally don't feel is entirely healthy because, you know, our revenue base is not diversified enough. And I just want you to understand, you know, my thinking in this is that I personally feel that the town's budget and general fund would be more healthy if, you know, there were available things such as the short-term rental tax that could help diversify the overall revenue mix, you know, not just the property taxes, but to give other resources in addition to the property taxes that's limited by that hard 2.5%. And I think when you do that, what I've just found over time, it makes it so that the town service program is more healthy, and it creates problems if you don't. Now, obviously, you superimpose upon that the needs we have in wastewater, and you know it makes it extraordinarily difficult. But I just want to make that point because sometimes, you know, not you or anything, but other people that, you know, deal with the you know, the leadership piece tend to be so hyper focused on the wastewater and the infrastructure that I think if when we go through this project, one of the things I'm here to do is I'm here to make sure that we're able to get the infrastructure we need and to drive that project forward. But at the same time, make sure I maintain a healthy ecosystem surrounding, you know, the general services. And I just want to bring that out in my own opinion. I think we're a little, you know, our eggs are a little too much in one basket. We're getting overly reliant on just the property tax. We need to work on trying to diversify the revenue mix. And I know we're going to do that over time. It's not just about this discussion, but these are the things that, you know, when you make your final decision, you know, put that in, it'll all, you know, come together. I know.
So just you say that you're concerned about it. yeah, no, I would agree generally, but based on the towns that you came from, Falmouth, OB, they had next to nothing in state aid as well. Did they have something else in terms of revenue sources that we're missing? Just
Not, that we're missing, and I would say Falmouth is a much more extraordinarily complex financial ecosystem that had, different revenue sources, that when we put together the mix, the property tax was, maybe in the 60 to 70% range, which is high, but I had an enormous problem on Martha's Vineyard in that there's no state aid to speak of, right? And one of the things I had to work real hard to develop the local estimated receipt base and analyze all the local fees, which they hadn't done, and to boost those up because they were well over 80% property tax. Now, thankfully, they had a low tax rate because the values are so high, but still the Prop 2.5 thing hurt them. And I would say this, the one thing that really created stability for that community was when the short-term rental tax came in. It is an economy that is largely based on these seasonal rentals. And that was a tremendous financial boon. And they were discussing before we used the short-term rental tax as really a way to stabilize the property tax levy. We were studying and were planning on implementing the residential factor section of the state assessment law, which allows you to set a separate tax rate for year-round residences and seasonal residences. So we were at the point where we were gonna, and that's something that we may get to, but there is a process. If things get too tough on the local economy, you can have a split tax rate. We don't have enough business in town to split the tax rate between businesses and residential, because what winds up happening when you only have 9-10% commercial is that, a 5-cent savings in the tax rate on a residential property will be like over a quarter or more of an increase on the tax rate for a commercial property, which will, make those bills go up inordinately. So you don't want to have, usually people are, looking at that split between the commercial and the residential, but the residential factor allows you to have a split between seasonal properties and year-round properties. And that is a way, by shifting that burden, you can create additional property tax levy that if you have a problem there, but there's not a lot of like other things like that you can just, start selling. I mean, I had a venue that you would not believe what people paid me to conduct their destination weddings, big money. And we could do some of that, but I mean, there's nothing big enough that's going to float the general fund, just these smaller ideas.
yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I don't want to belabor the point. I will say that I don't know, split, tax rate between seasonal and year-round residences might be something worth considering. Also, I would also say that, from a philosophical standpoint, if you're building a reliance in your budget on revenues that are variable based on economic conditions, that's also a little iffy, right? I mean, short-term rentals, I guess technically rooms tax too, is all kind of dependent on how the economy is doing. And when we take an economic turn, those collections are going to go down. What is that going to mean for our budget, right? So, but you and I could have a good debate another time. I think it's something for us to think about, come back at another meeting and everyone can have kind of sat on this and considered where they come down on it. We'll have the selectmen discussed it at this point?
Not the 75%. They all, looked at it and went, But I think, it's something that, and I appreciate you hear me out too, because I think it's so important. And to the extent that, the finance committee members kind of give this consideration. And if you have a recommendation on it, I mean, even if it's not the 75%, what I want to do is kind of work to tease that out and come up with something that we're comfortable with. And I'm willing to bet that the Board of Selectmen would love to hear what the viewpoints of the Finance Committee on an issue like that are. And that's why I'm sort of talking so much. I just want to make sure you understand all the ins and outs, and that maybe, if you do wind up making a recommendation to the board, I just, I think it'll be a reasoned kind of approach, and we'll all be together on it.
Yeah, we don't want to make a recommendation without being fully informed of all the facts and viewpoints. So appreciate that, Bob. And when is, sorry to take us so far, of course, with the agenda, but when would our next meeting be, Bill?
The presentation is on the 15th. That's probably be the next meeting if you all attended in a quorum, but there's no meeting scheduled after this. The report is going to be finalized, go to the Board of Selectmen. Next Tuesday, we would sort of make it available. So because we're having a hearing, we want it available a week before for the general public. So probably post it online. And then I'll work with you on the presentation. So there aren't any meetings scheduled of the Finance Committee after this, except for what's pending for town meeting.
So Bob, looping back to what you're saying in terms of teasing it out, when it would make sense to, get a sense of this, when would you need to kind of know more from the committee about where we stand on this?
Well, I thought it was important to have a discussion about it tonight, in that we are at least meeting with the public hearing on the budget on the 15th. And then on the 29th is the date that, and prior to that, we're going to have the Finance Committee recommendations on all the town meeting warrants, and the Board of Selectmen is going to finalize its town meeting recommendations and execute the warrant on the 29th. So that we're going to have everything completed, put to bed, 100% consensus, and voted by March 29.
That really
So
doesn't give us a ton of time.
Well, we would probably schedule a meeting after the Board of Selectmen meeting on the 15th to vote on each item on the warrant. Then
Okay.
that sounds like a good idea. So that way it's discussed in a public hearing format. There may be some, divergent approaches, and we then sort of take those into account. And before the 29th, the Finance Committee would meet, and then we would sort of fill out those areas on each of the warrant items.
So I'll just say where I am right now on this item is I don't feel comfortable with 75%. I could get behind 85%. I might be able to be convinced to go to 80. But that's where I am just as an individual member, and I don't speak for the entire committee. They're all quiet. So we'll see where they all land on it. But all right, let's move on. Article 20 or 19.
Article 19, amend tourism revenue preservation fund. This also goes with 20, and to establish a table. I have an updated version of this that actually shows the allocation.
Yes, we're doing it in 19.
Yes, 19.
We are accepting the short-term rental taxes from the contribution made to the Tourism Preservation Fund. So essentially restoring that article to what it was designed to do back in 2006 with that sort of funding level. And that frees us up to use the short-term rentals for the wastewater.
Questions on this item?
Bill, I can't read what you're printing on the scroll.
Right here is the explanation. Do you want me to? There's.
Make it a little bigger.
I still can't read it.
Let me reset the share. Maybe there's something wrong.
No, I think you had it, you had just gotten it pretty
There we go.
magnified. Jack, how's that?
That's good.
And we also have a copy of this in our, in the email that Bill sent out, right?
Correct. I mean, if you want to, next Wednesday, we could go through the entire warrant now that we have what Bob is telling us fresh in our minds, and then vote and then go into the meeting on the 15th with that in hand, with the ability to sort of make amendments to that subsequent to that if we want to.
What do members think about that? Meeting next week.
I won't be available.
What about others?
I'm available.
Checking.
I'm not sure. My wife's having some stuff done.
Okay, so it sounds like we wouldn't have a quorum to meet next
All
week.
right. So anything else on 19? This is again, as Bob indicated, this is sort of locking up the funding for the wastewater project as the other articles have. And 20, this is, Bob, do you want to explain that? This is.
Yeah, there's another version of this. Bill, do we have the version with the breakdown?
Yeah, I'll try to find it. Hold on.
And this is a new format. And it is the appropriation, annual required appropriation to the Tourism Revenue Preservation Fund, as created under that act of 2006 that we were just talking about. And the genesis of this new format is the Board of Selectmen had asked us to review the act with town council and, check on, the procedures that we're using, that everything's proper. And town council determined that it was necessary under the act to fund the individual project categories independently. And that's why it's broken down to the act provides that funding goes towards special events, marketing, public improvements, economic development. And so what we're showing here, that you just had it, yep, is
Yep.
these are the amounts. The total appropriation is calculated using just the language of the act in providing for the full funds. And this includes, for this year, their proportionate share of the short-term rentals as well. And so if you recall, last year, they were only about 446,000, but with that new money, it boosts them up to 567,000, which is higher than they've ever been. But I felt it was important to fund it in conjunction with the way the act is written. And then we came up with the split using the proportional share that they have historically used for the individual project categories. And I like the new approach. I think it fosters a greater sense of transparency for where the money's going, to what specific types of projects. And if people have questions that, that they can ask, well, what's this marketing for 180? What are we doing? What types of special events? But you can see the breakdown. And we anticipate for FY24, if we're successful in amending the act, as the previous article seeks a local initiative petition to do so, that number will in all likelihood return to the maybe 450,000 range. However, I need to point out that I have just recently seen the latest collections for the hotel motel tax. Even independent of any of the short-term rentals, those revenue collections are up higher to historically high numbers. And if they continue at that rate, we may see this fund stay in the 500 and 500 plus range. It may not go south to 500 just because of the, the strength of collections in the normal hotel motel. But that gives you a sense of what's going on with this article.
So Bob, I'm just going back up to Article 19. I think actually I helped Cleon get this bill passed.
Well,
Back
did
to
we
business.
not in focusing on the words, give you credit? I think that, it's really, the other article that I got to hand it to you, Stephanie, is that your guidance in this direction, I think enabled us to take advantage of the Municipal Modernization Act provisions that allowed us to create.
I'm
that
not looking for credit.
I know you're not. I know you're not, but thank you. I mean, folks just need to know. I thought that was a stroke of genius, and it's one of those examples of when everybody's like working towards the same end, we come up with great stuff. And so then now you're on the original bill, and if you go 1, 2, 3 lines from the bottom, that's the only new language, is accepting taxes generated by short-term rentals.
Right. So what I'm getting at though is, so it says a portion of the total local room occupancy tax, but it doesn't call out what that portion is. So how do we, when we get to 20, how do we derive what that percentage is? I'm not seeing the mechanics for that.
Well, the issue is that this particular article seeks to amend only section 1.
Mhm.
And it's there's another section that has that information in it, the calculation.
So I guess what I'm getting at is, if you're saying that the hotel motel tax numbers are looking good and could potentially continue to look good, and this I don't want to call it a slush fund, but this fund for economic development, could potentially be set at a higher amount. And at the same time, you're also telling us that, you're concerned about our over reliance on property taxes, not building necessarily enough of other sources of funds into the overall general operating budget. I mean, I guess that would seem to me to ask if it's worth revisiting section 2 and the percentage that overall is going towards the economic development. I don't know. I mean, I think there's some good projects that have come out of economic development, but there's also been like pickleball courts. I just don't know that that's economic development, right? So I think that might be a conversation worth having, if not for this town meeting, then maybe next year, once we have
Yeah,
better
and
numbers.
I would say, also that, and I need to salute, Bill Scott on this one with his background in economic development. He has developed a very strong relationship with the CEDC in terms of some renewed focus on real economic development. And if we can scroll down again to the next article, there's a whole section that just in this year alone, with first, starting the baby steps toward it, Bill has received the commitment from the CEDC to do some extraordinarily significant economic development work for the town that we're financing through these economic development projects. And I mean, I hope certainly to be able to leverage even more some, real first-class economic development through this fund. And but it's interesting the point you raise. I felt guilty as sin just taking the short-term rental away from them. I didn't have the nerve to take some of
It's
the
a
other
big
ones.
hawkish about it. I guess my other question is too, when we get into Article 20 and it has this breakdown, 40,000 for administration, 100,000 for special events, is that, I'm not familiar with the schedule of when the Community Economic Development Committee meets, but is that something that's kind of a standard amount, and then from there they'll decide how, what those special events are? Or is it they've already gone through a process and said, we want to divvy it up this way? I'm just trying to get the sequence in my. straight in my-
What they've
What-
done, and Bill could talk, they've used this is their historical proportional
Okay,
distribution.
But what we're probably gonna do is when we get to that and the presentation is actually list some of the events and projects that are related to this. And in the future, what we might want to do is, as they allocate this out sometime in January, we would actually create a spreadsheet that would say, here are the projects we're gonna do moving forward in the next fiscal year. So rather than creating the line items, I mean, we would create them and then determine the projects the year before in terms of special events marketing. And as Bob had indicated, we're working on economic development projects. The diff, the next article is
yeah,
what we're getting funded through them. And this is can you see that diagram?
mhm.
So,
I mean, before, yeah. I just
So-
would like to close out my kind of thought
sure.
on this philosophically. We have been talking to departments that don't have any kind of police and fire, don't have any, well, maybe not fire, but police, for example, doesn't have any source that's coming kind of directly to them. They often have to kind of fight for every dollar. So to a certain extent, I feel like if a department or a committee wants to have an increase, that there sort of needs to be a justification for it, not just because, hey, revenues went up, that automatically we're gonna, increase proportionally the amount that goes to marketing or whatever else. It just doesn't feel quite fair in comparison to kind of with other departments, but that's me. But please continue with the other items.
Sure. So back to the DIF, which is District Improvement Financing. I made a request and they approved it to do 3 projects with $75,000. And the principle of DIF is that revenue for infrastructure, DIF, MassWorks grants, betterments, user fees, then creates a wastewater investment, which then creates private development, which then provides revenue for infrastructure. So the DIF, the cycle is as you increase the increment that is from a base value, which is what we'll do with town meetings, set the base value. As growth happens, you can either borrow or allocate funds out of that growth to then pay for the infrastructure that created growth. Now, there are arguments that we shouldn't take the top off of new growth. We need it. But the DIF is sort of a if not for clause. If you don't have the DIF, you don't have the infrastructure and you don't have the growth. And we have some pretty clear indications to that in something like this, which is we don't see any growth in commercial over all these years without the infrastructure. So same kind of chart you have in your report. So what we're doing with the committee is we're doing an economic development analysis for the whole corridor to determine what the appropriate uses are, what the growth potential is, and being able to then extrapolate data that tells us what our DIF revenues might be, what our betterment revenues might be, and taxation, things like that. But as important, we want to determine with a market analysis, what are some of the uses that we want to favor? I mean, let me go back up to the beginning of the report, and here are some of the criteria that we want to accomplish. Diversify the tax base, stimulate capital investments for net taxable property value, attract and expand business. And it goes on to describe some of the criteria we want to accomplish. And And part of that is year-round jobs and, overcoming these issues such as, diverse tax base, as Bob has mentioned earlier. So this is a memorandum to the CEDC, and they basically confirmed that we are going to spend money on three things, which is that economic development analysis. The next thing is the DIF program happens in 2 cycles. First cycle is you lock up the increment, and the second cycle, you determine how much you're going to spend and where, and that is the development program. So this scope is to develop the development program for the next town meeting. That is, we'll have enough sewer information in terms of the project. We'll have enough revenue information so we can determine how much percentage of that growth we want to allocate to the project. And the last is basically we want to articulate, what grants would happen at what time so we can match those up well with the diffs. So this is an example from another project that I have done. It's called a sources and uses spreadsheet. And what it does is it takes sort of 3 sets of data. The project itself, the funding, and then the timing. So in the top part, we're using all diff. In this case, it was cash. It was about $600,000. And it funded the design so that we can come down to here and go after grants from that design. And there, so we achieved about 4.5 million there. And then there's other funding sources, and it's all time. So what this scope will do is get a grant writer in to help us understand what's out there and how we can sequence it to this. And then they'll do one MassWorks grant, which is probably our first ask in terms of grants. So that's the kind of things that CEDC is doing now. And so what you saw in terms of that warrant article is we're hoping that as they get to this point, we're going to be providing specific projects to them, staff, that will flush out where this money is going to go. So, and the diff is already started. We have all district laid out. Sorry, I'm trying to get this so you can see it. And the assessors has been great in helping us put together the program.
And you may have already done this, but could you share the SEDS memo that you just mentioned with the
Oh, okay, yeah.
committee? Just again, it's one of those things
Yeah, I
that
will
this is
send it
like
to
a
you.
really thick concept that it's helpful to be able to take some time over the weekend and review.
Yeah, I will send that to you. It's only a couple of pages in terms of its length and everything. So it's basically, if I can get the report back up.
Do committee members have any questions at this point on the diff?
No,
Yeah, I think we can move on. I mean, I know you've talked about it before.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be doing a presentation on the 15th to the Board of Selectmen to describe how it works. It's not overly complex, but there are multiple districts that you create, so there needs to be some explanation. The next article is 22, the Town Seal Committee, to set up a committee to study the town seal that was discussed by the board last night.
And I don't think this is anything new, right? We've seen this
No.
before. Okay.
Yeah, and CPA is the same articles you saw before. They were in our earlier versions. They haven't changed except for a few typos. And then zoning, short-term rentals, they allowed a better allocation in terms of to on-site short-term rentals. We still need to do a lot of work there to facilitate the needs of the, commercial properties. And then it goes on to the last thing. We have the ban for polystyrene. And then the last one is the Berry Ave zoning amendment.
But none of those are different from the last time we reviewed it, right?
No, they're the same. Pretty much everything is the same. We only dropped one article that was related to the enterprise account, but it's something that we would probably pick up in the fall. So,
Okay.
I think what we'll do is on the 15th, we'll meet with the Board of Selectmen and the Capital Budget Committee, and the schools are part of that presentation. And then after the 15th, I think we'll set up a meeting with the committee to formalize your votes on the warrant. That way we have heard from the Board of Selectmen in that regard before we make that action. Well, they don't need the votes before the 15th, right? You need it before the 29th, correct?
Yes.
All right. So 15th, we go to the board, and soon thereafter, we vote on each of the Finance Committee articles. What I'm gonna do is break them down into a table, so they'll be easier to digest rather than the whole document.
Questions for Bill or Bob on the warrant? Or any comments? Okay. Well, thank you very much for presenting on all that. Good conversation. So as far as the meeting on the 15th goes, is that something that the entire Finance Committee would go to? And can you refresh our memory of if it's in person or Zoom?
You're muted, Bill.
They are in person. You can zoom in, though. The board is a hybrid model.
But I think we'd like to have the full committee there. It's technically a joint public hearing with four entities, including the Board of Selectmen. We're gonna have a public hearing with the Capital Improvement Committee on the Capital Improvement Program. And then we're gonna have a public hearing on the annual budget together with the Finance Committee and the Selectmen. And we're gonna have a public hearing on the DY school budget with the Board of Selectmen. And those are all provided for in our town charter. And we'd like to handle it this year with, Bill and I are working out a program and a script that would have, start with the capital and a review of the capital budget through a presentation from the Capital Improvement Committee, and then with questions from the board and then the public. And then we would review the annual budget with a presentation from the Finance Committee and discussions, with the board, between the board and the Finance Committee, questions, and then the public, and then do a similar process with DY. And I may also provide just a review of the overall revenue piece and, finances to fund the budget, similar to what I did in January. So that financial update's part of the charter too. So that's kind of how the process lays out. So I tend to think, as many Finance Committee members as we can have there to participate, however you're comfortable in the conversation, in the hearing. Finance Committee's worked real hard on this this year, and so I think there's a lot to be proud of in what you're presenting.
So I'll be working with Bill on the PowerPoint for it. I'll plan on being there in person. Do other folks want to be there in person or online? It'd be just good to know going into it who's going to be there.
I can only be online.
That's right. You're in South Carolina.
I'll most likely
So
be
we'll-
online.
We'll send you the link, just like we would as if it's one of your meetings,
Okay.
and any packet information. If I may, can you see the presentation? This is a capital improvement program. We'll do something similar to this. It basically follows their report. the
Mhm.
role of the purpose of the presentation, their role, everything else. So pretty much close to what you had in the report, and then some of the, recommendations. We'll probably stay away from the recommendations that are capital in nature because they will have already covered them. And then we'll stick to your recommendations that are more budget related. So I can have this ready probably by Monday of next week and we can work over the details.
Okay, thank you. And I didn't hear Jack or Nate. Are you planning on coming in person or online?
Stephanie, everything's up in the air. My nephew's very sick. He's dying right now. So anyway,
Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry.
so everything's up in the air. Sorry.
That's perfectly understandable. Jack?
I will try to be there. It depends on my wife's condition at the time.
Okay. Well, at the very least, I'll be there. And anyone else that that can make it, we'd love to have you, but obviously, certainly family travel considerations, it's fine. And Robert, you said you're going to try to join online.
Right.
Okay. Very good. All right, so I think that covers the warrant. Is there any other old business or new business? I don't think that there's any budget transfers.
Not that I'm aware of. I can check one more time to make sure. We didn't send anything out to you.
Bill, I'd like small bills for pain and suffering. Just put it outside of town hall in the little drop box. I'll come by later.
That's what those drop boxes are for.
That's what they're for, yeah. So and then what's just the latest on having more minutes and the status of getting the meetings, recorded meetings up online?
We're gonna post them either the end of this week or next week, and then what happens is the consultant that we've arranged is going online and do the Board of Selectmen ones, and then there we'll start rolling through the FinCom ones right after that. So I'm gonna get everything together that's related to your budget review process and put it in sequence, and then work with Mary Alice or others to get it online. There is a budget transfer here. It was in.
But just to
the-
clarify, Bill, we don't need to
Sure.
have the minutes done in order to post the videos of the meetings. Right?
No.
Okay.
In fact,
'Cause we'd be waiting
Board
quite a
of
while.
Selectmen meetings are up there, yeah. So this budget transfer is from collective bargaining to the tree program. It requires FinCom approval, and I think, and then there is another one. But why don't we do them one at a time? Any questions on this one?
Did these go out? I don't remember seeing these.
No, I think Mary Alice sent them to me, and it might have been recently, so.
Okay.
So there's this one, because of significant windstorms, they're receiving a lot of brush and things like that at no charge. So this basically addresses those costs. The next one is Channel 18 activity until the receipts or appropriation available for 2024. And transfer to Channel 18. And don't know if that's it. Those are the two that you have.
Can you scroll down a little bit? Because just on the explanation for that.
Yeah.
So until the receipts for appropriations is available for FY24. Is this something that we've done before or has been problematic before?
Yeah, it has been an ongoing issue and a problem for, a long time, reserving funds for the support of the cable operations, because all of the cable money just goes through the general fund in the local estimated receipts. And what we did at the November town meeting is we created a reserve receipt account that will go in conjunction with the new cable franchise license that we have, that the fees are going from the cable company to the town are increasing somewhat, and they will all be placed in a special reserve account, and we will appropriate from that account. But for the remainder of this fiscal year, we need to this is the normal process that the town has done to transfer money. It's almost like robbing Peter to pay Paul, to meet the obligations to keep the cable system up, and to also a portion of the money goes to the DY school. There's a chunk there, but in the future, we're going to eliminate all of these transfers. This is going to go away, and we're going to use the funds are going to show up in a reserve receipt account. You're going to know exactly how much you have in the account. We're going to have a budget for how much we're going to spend, and we're going to present that for appropriation at town meeting. So we've addressed the problem, but when you vote it, the funds aren't available to the next fiscal year, which would be after July 1. So this is to get us to that point.
Scroll up a tiny bit. How much in Route 28 wastewater borrowing?
Oh, I'm sorry.
There we go. 53,000, and it says will be paid using other wastewater funds now coming online.
Yeah, this is some very old wastewater funding that is left over from, I don't even know what year, but we're reprogramming that, and all of the project is coming out of the the updated appropriations that we're making.
So this is, like you said, robbing Peter to pay Paul. Is it robbing or borrowing? Right? Like, if the money
No.
is coming in for FY24, do we expect to see it back at any point?
Well, this appears to be money that's no
Robbie.
longer needed.
Froggy, which money coming back in at what would
So
Stephanie?
specifically, I'm concerned about the wastewater. If we've got 50 grand, I don't care if it's from an old account. I would rather see that go to, wastewater. I feel like every dollar counts towards that. So I guess my question is if this is to continue until the receipts for appropriations is available for FY24 and that comes back in, can we bring back some of that $53,000 and put it into the WIF or?
Yeah, I think we can. The answer is yes, and there's new money coming in anyways. And I would just say is that Ed came up with this list of articles that he wanted to close out that were old, that probably should have been closed out before, and had proposed using these items to meet this obligation. And I took his recommendation. He's usually impeccably sound on managing some of these older accounts, and so I think this gets the job done, and we'll be in fine shape on replacing the money in the wastewater account that we need for when we're going to be borrowing, which we're not borrowing immediately.
Comments, questions from the committee?
I'll move that both transfers be approved.
Do I hear a second?
Bill, I'll second it, but Bill, can you slide that down a little bit more? I just want to see the selectman's signature. They did sign off already, right? Okay,
Yeah.
that's all I need. Thanks.
Any
Yeah.
discussion? I know Jack started to unmute before this. Did we have any discussion?
I'm not sure I heard the response to Stephanie's question about the transfer from Route 28 wastewater borrowing. Did you say, Bob, that we're getting that back? We will get that back? That is,
Not this exact 53,000, but a different 53,000 because what, you know.
out of
this-
the revenue that comes from the new cable system. Is that right?
No, it's not coming, it's not gonna come from the new cable system. The cable, what we're gonna do with the cable is avoid any of these transfers ever in the future. This is the last time we're gonna do this. And, you know, they left it unfunded with the idea that they were gonna transfer money into it. That was their financial game plan and its infinite wisdom. And what we've done is eliminated these transfers from the future by segregating all of the cable funds in the cable account, but it has to be used for cable related purposes. So we won't be able to fund it, the wastewater directly from cable. So what this is basically taking a bunch of these old accounts and liquidating them because Ed didn't have a way to apply this 53,000 to the current project anyways. So he just wanted to transfer, close that out, and he's got new accounts set up for what's going on now.
I guess my just question is, how do we explain to the average town meeting member that we had this 53,000 for wastewater and we put it someplace else? I understand what you're saying. This is an old account, probably dates back to sometime before 2011, I suspect. And Ed found it, realized it hasn't been spent, and figured it's candidate for this transfer. But I just, it's sort of like using money the town appropriated and voted on for one specific purpose, which we now have made clearer, or at least have gone forward with, and yet we're going to divert it to something entirely different. That's the only.
Right. Well, yeah, and I don't disagree with you, but I mean, all of these transfers, it's a process that is, you know, is done over and over and over and over. That's all of the transfers that come from things that the money was appropriated for a different purpose, like the leftover money from the impact resistant window treatments that they did years and years ago. And so it's set up to take these funds to transfer them, and that way we don't raise and appropriate under new money. We clean the articles up. And, you know, the other thing that you could do if they're not spent, you could, at some point, you need to close them all out into the general fund and just get rid of them. And that money would go back, and then you'd appropriate it. It would turn up as free cash. So I think these are articles that Ed had decided what, if they weren't transferred into needs, that, you know, at the end of the year would be closed out and sent back to free cash. But because we need it for this purpose, he's recommended that we make the transfers. But
All right, I'm on board.
And he's saying that the 28 fund can't be applied to the new fund.
yeah,
Can't be transferred.
that's what he's saying, that it's an older project. I mean, I suppose you could transfer it, but you know, he came up with it as his strategy to meet the cable obligations. And, you know, we're working on the current modern wastewater project independently from these funds.
All right.
I would like to see a different $53,000 and an attempt made to try to transfer it into if not the WIF, then I mean, why don't we have just sort of some other kind of separate fund that it is easy to roll over something into for wastewater? I don't know.
Yeah, no,
Think about
I
what's
didn't
going on somewhere around
micromanage Ed on his list. You know, he came up with it and he does a good job on managing all these old accounts. So I mean, I just went with him.
All right. Well, I'm going to be voting no, but we have a motion on the table. So all those in favor, George,
All right,
Jack,
Aye,
Robert,
Aye.
and I'm a no. I'm sorry, Nate.
Aye.
But that being said, I'll still be in to sign the transfer. All right. I think that's it. So unless there's anything else, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll move adjourn.
second,
All those in favor, Robert,
Aye.
Nate,
Aye.
Jack,
Aye.
George,
all right.
I'm an I as well. Thank you, gentlemen. Have a great
So
evening.
no-
Very much, folks. Have a
No
nice
meeting
night.
next week. The 15th is the next time. Thank you.
Thank you.